In the fall of 2019, one of the 3 or 4 times I was in e-hire, I was contacted by colleague Jill Cree to have me contact Henderson Public Libraries, a representative there. They were looking for somebody to do a presentation. I contacted them and began working on a presentation, the thesis being the mob in Las Vegas. We set a date for March of 2020, and so little did we know that was going to be a fateful month in the history of the world. It was scheduled for the first Saturday in March of 2020. Again, it was going to be the Las Vegas and the mob, and my thesis was I was critiquing the idea that things were better in Vegas when the mob was running Vegas, or when the mob was in town. And so I was critiquing that a little bit. That was going to be the main thesis. And so the few days before the presentation was supposed to be, the world was starting to shut down, March of 2020. They contacted me and said, hey, are you still wanting to do the presentation? World's locking down. I said, yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. And so I did that Saturday, the first Saturday of March, I did it. And, the next week, most things locked down pretty hard. And so, it was like the last hurrah, right? Last hurrah before things. And so I went, and so the crowd, there was about 30, 40 people. And let me just describing the demographics of the crowd is important because it really influenced the presentation and how it went. The maybe 40 people there, 95% of them were seniors. Most of them were native to Nevada, native to Vegas, or they had been living in Las Vegas since somewhere between the 50s and the 70s. These were old timers. Okay, they lived through the era I'm talking about, and in some ways critiquing. So I go in and I have my presentation. I know exactly what I'm going to say, and you can see the presentation yourself in the link below this audio file. And so going in, when I saw the audience, I didn't know what the audience was going to be before, but I went in and was like, oh, this is going to be a tough crowd, because I'm critiquing the very common attitude for individuals, especially those that have lived in Las Vegas, since the 50s, 70s era, that things weren't necessarily better when the mob was here. That is for people that have lived in Las Vegas between the 50s and the 80s, that is a mantra. It is a fact for them. It is not. The Las Vegas was better when the mob was in town. That is the thesis for them. And any critique of that is wrong. So I knew I was going to have a tough sell because I was going to be critiquing it a little bit. This presentation was, as a scholar, it really brought out the philosophical issues in studying history. What role does nostalgia play in history? Everyone in that room had a very nostalgic look about the past. Okay, it was their youth. It was their childhood. It was their youth. Okay, very rose-colored, nostalgic look at that era. Okay. Also, points of view. They'd lived in Las Vegas a long time. I moved to Las Vegas in 2005. Okay. And also, just personal points of view about things. Several people in the crowd commented at one point that, justifying the mob, they were like, well, corporations are organized crime too. Okay. And I disagree with that. I do not believe corporations are inherently evil. Corporations are not organized crime. I disagree with that thesis. I have a different point of view about those things. And so I'm talking to a crowd that has a different point of view, different interpretation, looks at things nostalgically, and just has a different point of view about life and things. And so I gave my presentation. I knowing that I was going to be pushing a little bit, so I shared my thoughts. And I brought up things like, well, yes, when casinos, not just mob casino, every casino back then, yes, they handed out food for free a lot, cheap or free. Rooms were comped a lot. They had a lot more comps. They didn't nickel and dime you. They didn't, they had free parking. Corporations today, yes, it's true. Corporations today nickel and dime people to death. 100%. Okay? Completely true. They're trying to make money. That's their job. The reason a business is a business is to make money. So yeah, they're going to nickel and dime you. Is it fair? Probably not. Is it nice to the consumer? No. I want free parking too, and so and so it's just very different views. I talked about things. I shared. Everyone was polite. Everyone politely listened. I will say my thesis was politely rejected, which is fine. I do not insist people think the same way I do. I'm not that kind of historian. I'm the kind of historian. People are allowed to have their point of view. That's fine. Freedom of conscience, freedom of speech. You get to think the way you want. That's fine with me. But I did state my thesis. I did discuss things. It was politely rejected. The question and answer period turned into more just nostalgically sharing stories, which was fine. We shared it again as a scholar. It was interesting to me how history is interpreted differently based on nostalgia, upbringing, perspective, right? Like for example, to me, Tony Spilotro is not a good guy. He's an unconvicted murderer. He was a suspect in 22 murders. Okay, he stole, he murdered, he assaulted people. Okay, so you get it. So my point, I've never met Tony Spilotro. Tony Spilotro died when I was a teenager. Right? I've never met Tony Spilotro. All I know about him is his criminal record. His criminal record, but also he doesn't really have a criminal record, but he has a unconvicted criminal record. He's a suspect in murders. He robbed. He stole. He's a shady character from a middle class American point of view, right? This one gentleman who was there, he worked for Tony Spilotro. He knew Tony Spilotro, worked with him. And to this guy, Tony Spilotro is the nicest guy in the world. Great guy, funny guy, hilarious, cool. You get it? Same person, two vastly different views of the guy, of a man. I'm focusing on one thing, his criminal record, or what should be his criminal record, I guess. Unconvicted criminal record. Others, this gentleman, he worked with Tony Spilotro. Tony Spilotro, nicest guy in the world. What was interesting to me is this gentleman never asked the question, why is Tony Spilotro being nice to you? And what would happen if you crossed Tony Spilotro? And I didn't ask those questions. I kept that to myself, but you get the point. Nostalgia colors our point of view, right? I have another experience. This one lady, she was a child during the 60s. Her dad worked in one of the mob-owned casinos. He was a pit boss. She says that periodically her dad, would come home. So they were a poor family. They didn't make a ton. But periodically her dad would come home with an envelope full of cash. A large envelope full of money. That was more than his monthly salary. Okay. And this lady, now old, now senior, now a senior, she was nostalgic remembering her childhood. They were poor. Then all of a sudden, their dad comes home with an envelope full of cash. I mean, she had tears in her eyes. It's a heartwarming story, right? So from her point of view, the mob saved their family. Gave her dad tons of money, right? From another point of view, like, she never asked, well, why is your dad getting all this money? And, like, from my point of view, it wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts necessarily. It might have been. I believe in multiple motivations. They might have been wanting to be nice. They were also wanting the dad to be quiet. A bribe. They were bribing him. And so you see, you get this experience was an incredible example of how history is viewed and how different interpretations influence things. And those two stories they told you to highlight that. It didn't matter what I said. They had their experiences. The mob was nice to them, right? And yes, things were cheaper back then. The mob-owned and non-mob-owned casinos, they didn't nickel and dime you. They had free parking. The food was cheap. The rooms were free or cheap. I mean, they gave you a lot of free stuff, to keep you coming back. So, this is a very different view of things. So, it was a very enlightening historical experience for me personally. Everyone was nice. No one was mean. It wasn't heated or anything. Everyone politely rejected it. They had just shared their stories. So the question and answer period was just sharing stories, and I listened because it is the primary document. That's the thing. I was talking about things historically. I wasn't there. These people were they were the primary documents. They lived through it. They knew the people I was talking about personally. And so why silence the primary documents, right? And actually, this is an example in how you need to interpret the primary documents, right? For example, Tony Spilotro was the nicest guy I ever met. That's what this guy said. Tony Spilotro was the nicest guy I ever met. But on the other hand, he was a suspect in 22 murders. So we had a good, where everyone shared their stories, and just an incredible example of the primary documents, right? And so I wasn't gonna silence that. They were the primary documents, and so primary documents extremely important in the study of history. And I'm going on too long, but it was a good experience, and you have a great day.